Hello, thanks for checking out A Noise from the Deep, the Greenleaf Music Podcast. This is Dave Douglas, and this is a brand new episode with drummer, composer Ian Chang, a solo artist and a member of the indie rock trio Sun Lux, recently nominated for an Academy Award for their score of the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. As always, we do talk about the music, where it comes from, how we do it. It was great to get an inside look at Ian's work, and even quiz him a little bit about his approach to my record Gifts and our new Trio Live release. This podcast is ad-free since 2013. And to keep it that way, we ask you to join Greenleaf Music as a subscriber, or simply to go over and check out the ever-expanding roster of releases. Subscribers get a video version of this podcast, as well as annual special releases, tickets, access to the entire catalog. I hope you will join the community of subscribers and help us to continue our work. Thanks so much. And enjoy this conversation with the great Ian Chang. So it's Ian Chang, and I mean, a lot of you probably know a lot of different facets of Ian's music, but Ian played most recently on my album Gifts, and you would have heard him if you knew the subscription album from a few years ago called Uplift with Bill Laswell and Joe Lovano and Julian Lage and Mary Halverson. It was an incredible date, and it's been my honor to play with Ian. And in the few years I've been playing with Ian, everything's changed in his career and music and life, and I don't even know the half of it. And that goes for his more distant past, as well as many times as we've sat on a train and I've tried to pick his brain. Again, I only know the half of it. Ian is an incredible drummer and electronic musician and composer, and he sent me some music of his that I was not familiar with at all. So, Ian, you're in Mexico City, first of all. Yes?
It's true. Yes.
And this is where you live now.
Yes, this is where I live. I've been here for 1 year almost.
And you're playing a lot of gigs around Mexico City?
Not that much around the city yet. I'm hoping that can pick up at some point, but most of my time is devoted to being in the studio, which I have a little studio here, and occasionally I travel to play, and it's a huge honor to be able to do that with you and a bunch the past year and a couple of years and around this release Gifts. It's been like really just such a beautiful experience for me, and I'm grateful for every opportunity that we get to make music together and play together. I feel like my life is constantly shifting around, and I'm constantly trying to figure out like what it looks like, but right now that's what it looks like, is mainly working in the studio day to day on like film scores and things like that, production work for other folks, sometimes recording drum tracks for people. But yeah, I feel like I've always had my fingers in a lot of different pies, for better or worse. Yeah.
But your studio, it's in your house or nearby?
It's nearby. It's like a 20-minute bike ride or like a 10-minute cab ride. Yeah.
And it's just your space. It's all your stuff is over there. And
I've got it's a small production room within a larger studio, which I'm grateful for, because that means there are other people who work there. And so, the sort of cave-like solitary life of studio life, as people who might be familiar with that, is eased a little bit by just having, first of all, people who are from Mexico, like here, like working there all the time and being able to kind of like interact with people and meet other musicians, and there's so much fantastic stuff happening here all the time. I've been lucky to be able to sort of be part of a larger studio that I'm not just like all by my lonesome all the time. Yeah.
It must be a lot of the work, the recording you're doing is remotely collaborating
This is true. Yeah.
with Sunlux,
Hmm.
Rafiq,
Hmm.
and Ryan Lott,
Hmm.
but also your own scores that you're making. And then,
Hmm.
as you said, like you're creating drum parts for people. Um, and you can do all that from that studio.
Yeah, I've lately been using a thing called audio movers because it is hard to remotely do work for people. I just feel like I'm kind of like throwing a dart at like a target, but I don't know what the target is exactly a lot of the time, you know?
What do you mean?
Like if someone sends me a track and they're like, oh, there's some drums in here, but we want them
Ah,
replaced.
right.
But do your own thing, like do something different. You
Yeah.
know, in a studio environment, I can try like four things right off the bat. They can like give me feedback on what's feeling right. And there's more of an exchange. And that feels like I'm able to sort of like inhabit their world properly rather than just kind of like go with an instinct and kind of see if it, you know, hits the mark for them.
Or
But
send
if,
it off and it's here it is, it's finished. I'm done. Boom, boom.
right,
This is
yeah,
more like in real time you can create a track and they can listen to it. Yeah.
exactly, and stream like high quality audio while doing it, while talking to them, and it's been a really nice way to work remotely, as opposed to when I used to do it without audio movers, which basically, yeah, it just helps kind of helps the process along, and it makes it more meaningful to me too, because then I can actually feel like I'm collaborating with someone rather than working in a vacuum, hoping that what I do it feels right for their music, you know.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. So it's audio movers that makes that possible.
Yeah, because basically it's a service that allows me to stream like as I'm doing my drum takes, like they're hearing it pretty much in real time, obviously with a little latency, but like in high quality. So even if they're like, oh, like if they have like some comment about the sound of the way I'm capturing the drums or anything like that, that can all be done in a way that's very detailed and true to like what's happening. Obviously, it doesn't beat being in the same room as people, but it is definitely a step closer.
I was going to ask, why do we even leave our homes anymore? You know, why not do everything this way?
I think there's
I mean,
still
why do we have to go play North Sea Jazz Festival this weekend when we could just be sitting at home using audio movers?
definitely there's nothing to me that replaces like playing music with people in a room together, especially if any level of improvisation is involved. There's there's nothing that replicates that. Same way how like you know as great as Zoom is and everything, it's not the same as interacting with someone in person. For me, like one of the biggest reasons I fell in love with music and pursued this as a life was is the feeling of playing music with people, and that is something that like to me can't really ever be replaced. Um, no matter how good the technology is, like even if it's holograms or whatever, like,
Yeah, of course I agree with you.
yeah.
I was kind of half joking, but it is
I know.
enticing to think that we wouldn't have to go to the airport anymore.
Yeah, there are all the things around it. Yeah.
But you're right. Playing music in the same airspace
Hmm.
on the same brain waves, yeah, there's nothing like it. And when I first, during the pandemic, started doing remote recordings,
Mm.
it was that feeling of putting on the headphones and playing along to a Rudy Royston track that he had sent me that made me feel like I was still human. That
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that overwhelming joy
Totally.
of hooking up with someone in the musical realm, and then you know even further grateful when we started playing in the same space together again. You know how magical that was.
Absolutely. I think the pandemic really put the value of those kinds of things in perspective for a lot of us, and I'm definitely in the same boat there.
Yeah. So we should get into some of this music, Ian. And I think,
Let's do it.
I mean, you were talking about improvising with people, and
Hmm.
one of the things you sent me, Father Figures, is
Hmm.
mostly improvised, is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So that's a group. Yeah.
It's not a,
That
a facet of your work that I was even familiar with. So I'm sorry. I
yeah.
apologize.
Oh no, there's I think we all have parts of us that are not so public anymore, or I don't know. It's music that was made at one point. The group is called Father Figures. It's Jazz Walton and Adam Schatz on tenor saxophone, Spencer Zahn on upright, Ross Edwards on keys, and we all went to NYU together. We were best friends in school, both in terms of like personality wise. We all got along. We all lived together in various configurations over the course of our college years, and we also loved playing music together. And one of the things that we kind of were really interested in exploring at the time was getting together and playing free, um, a lot, and recording almost all of it, and then doing the painful thing of listening back to almost all of it and talking about it. And I think one of the values that we had in doing that was also trying to improvise freely as a group in a way that was not as much centered around sort of like soloists and supporting soloists, which obviously there's nothing wrong with that, but it was just something that like I think we were craving exploring in the context of school, and like sort of doing it outside of school on our own. We did a lot of sort of real rough and ready, minivan touring in those days. This would be like from 2009 through 2011, 12 or so. And I really like, I sent this like a piece from like our first album together with to Dave for this setting, because it really was like I was really learning who I was as a musician in a lot of ways, with these guys. And another thing you'll hear when you hear the track is like we were also very interested in like manipulating, what we recorded, and using the studio sort of as a further layer of experimentation. That was something we were very interested in, and that's like definitely carried through to my like throughout my musical life to till today as well. So, but I'll stop talking about it, and we can listen a bit. Yeah,
How do you credit the compositions? I'm just curious.
it's just all split between all five of us.
All
Cause
five.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
That's so
yeah.
cool. So, and the piece, this particular piece is called From the Cocoon. cool. So you're saying a lot of that was improvised and then you cut it together,
Yeah,
the painstaking process of listening to everything.
yeah, yeah. And we would always listen as a group and kind of like assess and kind of and cutting it together. We did as a group as well. And a lot of what you were hearing was stuff that was like sped up to double time, which makes it an octave up, and kind of superimposed on top of what was originally played, or like kind of collaged together in a way. And the record that it's from, not every track is like this in terms of like how heavy-handed the editing and manipulating process was. But yeah, that's a good representation of kind of like what the spirit of me and my friend like figuring out what it meant to play music and play music together was, and capturing it was like, yeah.
So I went to NYU also, but you know, several light years before you, and but nobody was playing like that at NYU. Was this like was this accepted in what people around campus were doing?
I think that there were, thankfully, I feel like when I was there, the faculty and like there was a pretty big range of different kind of people teaching there and people attending. So um, it didn't feel like it was overwhelmingly overbearing in any one direction or another. So I do feel like it was accepted, and to a degree, like we actually managed to like weasel our way to being like an ensemble group that was working with and at the time we worked with, this was maybe a year or two after this recording, but we worked with Wayne Krantz as an ensemble
Wow.
within the NYU kind of structure, and that was like
Yeah.
extremely formative for us as well. And Wayne, as someone who like almost militantly carves his own path, that was like a very good kind of mentor for us to sort of figure out like continue and figure out like what we were interested in and how to cultivate that and how to like follow the breadcrumbs of inspiration that we had before us.
Do
Yeah.
you mean militant path in terms of insisting on improvisation?
There was periods in his life where he like didn't like shut out all, like he wasn't listening to like other music so that he could like really like focus on his own thing. Like, and that was very interesting for me to like kind of be in dialogue with like as a younger person, like, because not everyone kind of has the same kind of view, but he was just so individualistic in his approach in terms of like how he developed his thing and also how he was encouraging kind of others to do the same in some ways. Yeah, that was we had a really beautiful time kind of being coached by him.
Wayne, I brought him to the Banff workshop
Mm,
when I was there and watched him work with young musicians. And he wasn't at that time. I know that he keeps changing,
hmm.
but at that time, he wasn't using any written music or any preconceived ideas. The whole idea was to just get up and start
Get up and
playing.
start playing. Yeah.
He had his own sound and his own style, so
Hmm.
what he was going to do was coming from there, but
For sure.
it was different every time
Mm,
to watch young players have to just hear what's happening and adapt was really
mm.
kind of inspirational.
I think something we all really kind of got from him was sort of this idea that like the way that we often think about composition and improvisation as like being like two like completely separate things doesn't necessarily have to be true, and like in a lot of ways they're sort of the same, and I think like what you were saying about like his approach of just like getting people together and like getting up there and just playing and making something in the moment and listening and making decisions, like that was that was definitely something he instilled in us as well, as like sort of like, yeah, this is composition, and like composition is also improvisation. Like they're very interrelated.
Wayne Krantz is also very funny, and I would imagine, hearing just this track and not having heard everything else that you all did, but it sounds to me like there's some humor involved
For sure.
as well in terms of the editing. in terms of this,
Hmm.
double speed stuff,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
and wanting it to refer to earlier kinds of, edited improvisation music, let's call it.
Right. Yeah. Because obviously we weren't the first to do these kinds of things.
It certainly was in the air, sure,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
of course, anything you can think of, someone was doing it in the '60s.
Yeah.
But what I mean that, it's not existing in a vacuum, that music.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so
Yeah.
for then Wayne to have his own insight into it and his own sense of humor,
Yeah. Yeah.
he is one of the most quotable musicians that I ever invited to Banff. But it would be a huge tangent for me to start telling Wayne Grant stories. So I think we should move on to this next track, which I think is a few years later, and it's all just you, right? Playing all the instruments and producing.
Yeah. So this comes from my first kind of and only full length album that I put out under my own name. And it is sort of part of a journey that I was having with certain technology. This called sensory percussion, by this company Sunhouse, which I actually use in GIFs as well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
as well as many other projects. But this was sort of I think, I'll try to keep it short, but like my initial investigation into this technology was one in which where I was always interested in making electronic music and like making and programming beats and things like that, but I never found like a window into it that felt like my honest voice and like felt like a contribution in any way that was not just, I don't know. I had a hard time getting into it, but there was a certain technology that was released at a certain point where it really freed me up to be able to maybe kind of approach what I was thinking of, just making electronic music, but approaching it in a way that was really coming off of my hands and my relationship to drumming, and my relationship to like the touch of that and like the feel of that. And Lion Dance, which is a song that I sent in as, in addition to sort of this part of the exploration of this kind of technology. And I was doing it in such a way where there was no actual sort of drum recorded. I was not recording any drums. It was all just cut up samples of things.
Wow.
And this track in particular, meaningful to me because I was sort of reflecting on my childhood. I grew up in Hong Kong, and like reflecting on a lot of the sounds that I used to hear there that are familiar to me that I don't hear very much often anymore. And there's like a certain kind of memory of like what a lion dance sounds like, and it's like usually gongs and drums, and there's like a specific type of rhythm. And I was kind of taking that feeling of that rhythm and creating something out of it that like felt like my homage to sort of my childhood in a way. And sometimes it's hard for me to sort of like understand how like all the music that I've studied and worked on like connects to the culture that I'm from and the place that I'm from. And I think this was like an effort to sort of like find a bridge there.
Is that like a New Year's thing? Lion dance?
Yeah, Chinese New Year's thing. Exactly. Yeah,
Thing that you
people,
see in the streets. Yeah.
yeah, they like, it's like usually multiple people and one person's got the head and there's like other people with the tail and they have this kind of choreographed dance and there's like another role which is like this person with like a kid's mask on, like with a fan, and it's like this whole thing that we used to do in school growing up and used to see in the streets all the time. So
And how old
yeah,
were you when you left Hong Kong?
I was 14, so kind of
Wow.
young enough, but also old enough in a way.
No, but you got the full experience. I mean, 14.
Yeah, 14 is full. Yeah,
And but
yeah.
you must have been also learning English in school, or maybe going to an English speaking school, or how did that?
I was going to an English speaking school, and yeah, so I kind of learned English and Chinese in tandem.
Which Chinese? Mandarin, Cantonese, or
It's funny, in school I was learning Mandarin because the school I went to taught Mandarin, but just in my like home life and everything, I spoke a lot more Cantonese. So
wow.
it's a funny sort of fragmented thing where like my relationship to Chinese now is very like when I read it, I'm thinking in Mandarin because that's like what I learned, but like I'm more comfortable speaking in Cantonese.
But you could go into a restaurant in Hong Kong now and
Yeah,
figure out. what to say, and
Oh, absolutely.
you
Yeah.
still you haven't completely lost either of those.
No, no, not completely. Yeah.
It's amazing. Wow. Okay, let's check it out. Lion dance. Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you, Dave.
That's fantastic, Ian. There's so much going on in there. I couldn't fade it out. So we just heard the whole track.
it's a dense guy.
Wow, so much going on. There's something really subtle in the groove,
Hmm.
like the time feel,
Yeah, yeah,
that seems pretty sneaky.
yeah. It's so it's sort of a riff on what would be sort of like a more classic lion dance rhythm, and it's actually based on. When I was like thinking about this, I was just looking up bunch of different videos of different lion dances and things, and there was one particular video that actually came from Hong Kong, and there's this one drummer who just had a like a swing to what he was doing that was it felt in the spirit of the tradition and the music, but it was felt like very different. And like I didn't end up doing exactly what he was doing, but I'd sort of like there's like a sort of like hiccup thing where like kind of backwards swung effect that was happening that I like really drew inspiration from. Where instead of like a rhythm being like the dun 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 dun, it's like dun 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 dun. So like this kind of like staggering thing that like
But
repeats.
it's also you're doing it in a way where it gets like way up on top of the beat.
Yeah.
It almost starts to feel like maybe you're speeding up, but it's not. It's just like where the swing placement is.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then it must have been really hard to integrate that underlying pulse with all the other elements that you were playing with and make it make sense.
Hmm.
From my limited knowledge of producing this kind of music, you have to be really careful. You can't just like mix any kind of swing feel with any other kind of swing feel or a straight eighth note
Right.
feel. Like
Yeah.
it has to all be intricately um, calibrated to fit together.
Yeah. That's very well put.
Well, it's amazing how many different sounds you have that you've managed to bring into that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny listening back now. I'm like, oh god, this thing is like so dense. Like, what was I thinking? But I am proud of it, and like the it is a very unique thing. Like, I don't know. I always for me, it's always a joy when I can find something that feels like it musically works and is feels like an honest expression and sort of something that feels natural to me, but also is like foreign to me. You know what I mean? Like when I made this, it was very much just like I don't know if I've heard this before, and for me, that's something that's always exciting, but can sometimes be also a trap as well. You know,
I'm not sure what you mean.
I think like the sort of the drive to make something unique is something that I've always had as a musician and as a composer producer. Like I'm always trying to do something a little left of what other people are doing, and I've found in my experience at least that like sometimes that can lead to something like very rewarding and feeling very individualistic, but also sometimes it means that I'm like making decisions for the sake of being different rather than something that's actually musical. I guess if that makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't apply here at all, Ian.
Well, I appreciate that. And I agree actually for whatever it's. I agree with that, and I feel really good about that track. And it's I think I was just speaking more generally that like it's while it's a value that I hold, I recognize that it has a danger as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess I know what you mean. It's that's a hard area of music to talk about, I think, because it
Mm.
bumps up against quote unquote authenticity and
Right.
what is mine and what belongs to a culture that's not mine and
Mm.
how do I, I mean, like
Yeah.
you're speaking about the lion dance and your childhood and where that came from, and yet it's a very American. First of all, the surface sound of the music
Hmm.
sounds somewhat American, but also the way that you talk about it and work with it is
Hmm. Totally.
more
Yeah.
from here than from there.
Hmm.
But at the same time, we clearly get the reference. I mean, I don't think that you would have had to explain it to me to get the reference.
Hmm.
So you're in that sweet spot. Um, and I see what you mean about trying to do something your own way and doing something different, and then that being a not always successful.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you used the word a trap, but I sort of feel like, I mean, one of the reasons I love playing with you is because it just always feels like Ian. It's multifaceted and it's coming from all over the place. And my music is a little bit like that too. And the things that I ask people to do are unusual. And
Hmm.
I have been guilty of uh, going too far or ending up with a result that was
Mm.
more odd than it needed to be, let's say,
Mm.
to make the point. But I sort of feel like when we go up to play, that's the last thing on our mind, at least my mind, and I'm
Totally.
assuming you too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
you know, that we usually, if we need to worry about anything, it's Rafiq. And well, of the when we've played as a trio, I sort of feel like Rafiq is somebody who maybe and we a couple weeks ago we did a conversation like this, and
Mhm.
you know he all these things that we're talking about and thinking about the making of the music and where it's coming from and success or failure and whatever that means.
Mhm.
I feel like he's really wound up in that inside.
This is true.
Like it's
Yeah,
a
this
big
is
part of
true.
what he thinks about in his music making.
Hmm.
That's
Totally.
a lot
Totally.
more than me, and I think I sense more than you too.
Yeah. 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 I think sometimes I try as best as I can to sort of just let instincts lead the way a lot of the time, um,
Yeah.
and whatever things end up. Yeah,
As a composer, you have to get out of the way sometimes to let instinct have a space
for sure. Yeah, definitely,
in the game.
definitely.
I didn't make this segue intentionally, but it leads me to ask about Sunlux.
Hmm.
And you sent a track from Sunlux
Hmm.
where you collaborate with Rafiq Bhatia and Ryan Lott. And it's a band that's made a fair amount of recordings.
Hmm.
I mean, I tried to insinuate myself into one of the record dates and got cut out of I didn't make it to the final
No,
record, which is okay.
you're on the
No,
record, Dave.
no hard feelings. It's not
Dave, you're on the
important. It's
record.
not a big
I
deal, Ian. It's
I almost
okay.
even pulled that track in to just kind of, but you are on the record. For the record,
It's
you are
okay.
on the album.
I can deal with it. I've been in this business a long time.
The track is called "The Fool You Need," and Dave is on it. Maybe he wants to disassociate from it. Is
No, no, no,
that?
no,
I'm
no.
joking. I'm
I
joking.
mean, we started talking about Rafiq, and we
Yeah.
started talking about, just the spirit of making this music and coming up with different things and the challenges and opportunities of that. Well, Sunlux takes that to another level. Um, I don't understand how the collaboration really would work. I don't think anyone outside it would, because it seems like the music that results is so personal and
Mm.
now recognizable, especially in the wake of the film score for Everything Everywhere All at Once. When you sent me this track, which is called Only,
Hmm.
it reminded me of the score.
That's really cool to hear, actually, because sometimes I feel like I'm so close to it that things feel more disparate than maybe they are, or like there's like relational kind of stuff happening that I'm not even totally aware of. Because as a band, it's like we do have a very specific sound, but it also does tend to touch on many different things.
Mm,
And to talk a little bit about our collaborative process, it varies a lot from song to song, and I think we're constantly kind of changing how that happens.
mm,
To start off, I will say that like Sunluck started out as a solo project of Ryan Bott, and in a lot of ways, he created the blueprint, which Rafiq and I have now joined the band for now 10 years and developed it. But that was like where it was coming from was something that Ryan started, and I think that is important to say because it's still salient. I think with the music that we're making now, and we do have sort of our own roles in some ways, but we all are all composers and are all producers. Like Ryan, for example, does handle almost 100% of like the lyrics, um, and a lot of the time, like the melody of what he's singing, like that's like generally his arena. But yeah, we work in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it can be like we'll find a sound that we're all fascinated with, and then we'll make kind of like build a loop out of it, and then find different ways to sort of build the build the house around that. And then you typically the vocals and what Ryan does with his like singing and everything, it's like that comes last. So we tend to build instrumentals and then find a song out of them. But that's not always the case. Sometimes Ryan comes up with like a song fully on a piano and he's like, okay, let's like find an environment for this, For this particular track only, I wanted to share it because it felt like a pivotal moment in some ways as a band, because I think as a band we do a lot of sort of like capturing of things in the studio, and then like they're almost like all of these ingredients that we like go in the lab and like concoct them together in whatever way we sculpt, and it's a very sort of time consuming process.
Hmm.
One could say it's like we're like building a Swiss watch or something. There's all these details to like make sure it all fits together perfectly. But in a lot of ways, I always felt like that process that we have as a band often with creating recordings felt quite divorced from the way that we played live and the energy that we had playing live, which involves a lot more improvisation and a lot more sort of risk, for maybe in a way. This track was something that we kind of made accidentally. We were in the studio. There's a camera crew just capturing like kind of B-roll stuff just to have stuff to help promote, things later. And when they first showed up, they were like, okay, we know we can't really be like moving around in the room with you as you're recording music, but like, can you guys just like play something and we'll like walk around you and like take some shots of you guys playing.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, okay, fine, And we were like in the middle of a tour, so we had all this energy of like playing together as a trio, kind of in us. And basically, what happened is when they were filming us, we played almost verbatim what the instrumental for this track only is, and it was like a completely like it feels very structured weirdly, but it was completely off the top of our heads, and like we didn't like talk about anything about it. And at the time, the engineer was like, "Oh, I hit record on that, by the way." We were like, "Okay, cool. Like that's fine. Whatever. Let's move on to the next thing." And then Ryan kind of unearthed it later on when we were going through materials, and he was like, "Guys, like this was pretty cool. Like I kind of want to like explore this." And so since then, we've kind of taken a lot more to the idea of playing together in the studio. And so this was like a meaningful kind of song to me, and kind of how it came about. And it speaks to sort of the blurred line between what is composition and improvisation, I would say, as well.
Yeah.
But enough talking. We can listen
That's
to it.
great. I would just say, that is a brilliant engineer that he hit record.
Yeah.
That's a presence of mind.
I'm grateful.
Yeah. You want
Yeah.
people like that around.
Yeah, Andres McKay from Budapest. That's who gets credit for the song in a lot of ways.
Was that at Shazad Ismaili's place, or where were you
We
recording
were
this?
recording in like outside Budapest, in
Wow.
like a studio where we were also like it was in the middle of a tour, and we had like maybe 4 or 5 days, so we just hold up in the
Nice.
studio for a few days. Yeah.
Sounds very Casino Royale.
A lot less glamorous.
Okay, so I'm going to play some of this track. Um, it did funny things to my system the first time I played it. Like there's a heavy low end in the opening, and but then I called Ian, everybody, and I said, "Is this intentional?" And he said, "Yes, very much." So there's nothing wrong with your system.
Speakers.
When you took me for the others, from me the days when you took me for the days. You took from me the years and how I wasted all my time spending all my love. How I wasted all my love spending all my time. Oh, there's so much I can take. Only chasing you. Am I only chasing you? Maybe there's nothing I can do. Maybe there's nothing I can do. I'm getting nowhere close to you. You're just a mirage. You'll only love me from afar.
That's so great. What's that initial sound? Is that coming off like a sampler or?
That was something that Ryan crafted after the fact,
Oh, wow.
from his voice. Yeah. So it was from the source of that sound is his voice. Kind of this banshee scream.
Wow.
Yeah. But when we play it live, I do use a sampler to fire those off, like kind of as just standalone samples. Yeah.
Cool. So, like, there's a certain closeness to the miking of the drums and an intimacy to the
Mm-hmm.
way they're produced with, all kinds of special sauce compression and reverb
For sure. Mm-hmm.
do you feel like that's something you try to recreate when you play a piece like that live on the stage?
I think especially with compression, that is the hard thing to recreate live on a stage because the enemy of like compression with drums is bleed from other things.
Uh,
Whatever sound engineer we're working with, I do tell them like this song I'm playing brushes, so it needs to be a little bit more kind of gained up and more intimate. And we also have a mic that we put sort of in the center of the kit, and a dynamic mic that doesn't take a lot of bleed that um, the engineer can play with in terms of like compressing that mic and blending it in.
yeah.
So there's only so far we can take the sound live, but it's a different medium, and I think I'm like definitely happy with how it is presented live and doesn't have to sound like just like the record because we do really push things in terms of drum sounds and in particular that track with like how kind of you can hear my breath and all of this stuff. In a way, it's sort of like so hyper real that it's not quite realistic, but it's all based on like the things that make something feel human, breath, like creaking of things and all. And if you listen closely, you can hear the camera people like walking around us and with their equipment and stuff like that. But I think that's something that as a group we're all interested in like exploring sound in such a way that's like rather than like recording something that is acoustic and then like processing it in a way to make it sound more electronic or robotic in a way. We're a lot more interested in capturing something acoustically and like over exaggerating the things about it that people would normally cut away. Something about that feels like just like very um, I don't know, tangible or something to us in terms of sound. And it's something
Well, it's a
we
really,
share. Yeah.
really, yeah, it's a really special band because of that. Because all three of you, that attention to detail, but also that the composing is sort of collaborative, and is born from the sounds themselves,
Yes,
if I'm understanding correctly.
totally. We're born from
And
sound. Yeah.
so, how does that lead a band to getting a major film scoring contract with the with I guess it's not really Hollywood, right? It was A24 was the
A24.
producer.
Yeah. And honestly, we were lucky because we were hit up to do that movie by the directors, the Daniels. And it was basically because they liked our music that we had put out as a band.
Wow.
And I think it probably also didn't hurt that Ryan had already sort of a resume for scoring at the time. He'd done a couple features, and Daniels had also checked out my solo music, like from what you heard, line dance and Rafiq's solo music. And given the multiversal nature of that movie, I think like um, they sort of hypothesized that we would be good for the project because we could kind of bring a lot of different things to the table, but also kind of marry them together in a way that like felt intentional and musical. If people like ever ask me for advice on like how to like get, it's like I don't feel equipped to answer because honestly, like we just kind of made the music we wanted to make over the years, and it kind of spoke to someone enough that like they wanted it involved in their film project, and it happened to be a great film. And I feel super honored to be a part of that. And
Maybe that should be your answer, though, Ian. When somebody asks you, make the music you want to make.
mhm.
Keep making it.
Yeah, that is definitely something I do tell people because like if it's the music that you want to make and the music that you want to hear insofar as like how it gets out into the world, all of that is such a game, and the industry is really opaque and confusing, but like to whatever degree it does reach people's ears, it's only going to resonate with like minds, and like that can kind of lead to some very beautiful connections and things that you wouldn't expect. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say it's a very gutsy choice for the directors
Yeah.
because at that level of film, the music you usually hear is much more homogenized and making reference to popular, recognizable sounds,
Yeah, yeah.
whether it's orchestral or pop music
Yeah.
or string sounds or whatever it is.
Hmm.
Not that many decisions that get made where you hear a newly made movie that's got a soundtrack that's not like anything you've heard.
Well, that means a lot to hear from you. It's been interesting because since then I've been doing more film work, and film music as an idiom is definitely real. And it's interesting to sort of like be jumping into a field that like I previously had no idea I was ever going to be doing, and kind of like creative opportunities that come from not knowing too much about it.
In a way, you have the perfect education for it
Mhm.
because you've made all these disparate sounds and you've figured out how to do it in a really interesting sonic way
Mhm.
using not just technology, but you wouldn't have the same feel for it if you weren't also a drummer. If you'd gone to school for film scoring,
Mhm.
you would have learned a different set of skills that
Totally.
may
Yeah.
have also served in other ways,
Mhm.
but you wouldn't have learned this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the fact that I can call you to come and play with my crazy band, where, I feel like I'm much closer to, for lack of a better word, jazz, than most of my peers and colleagues and friends. Just I've been
Mm,
doing it a long
mm,
time and I came up in a very
mhm,
traditional vision and did a lot of gigs
mhm,
early on in that world. And so I feel like, and I'm
for
happy
sure.
that I did, and I'm proud, and I love it. And I feel like when I make reference to it in my own music, it's just, again, not something I ever planned. I'm certainly not, Mr.
Mhm.
Straight Ahead by any stretch of the imagination. But,
Not at all.
when
Yeah.
I ask you and Rafiq to play Take the A Train, me making that arrangement was partially about having the two of you in the band
Totally.
and
Yeah.
what we could do with it that would be interesting and fun and different and challenging.
Yeah.
And you guys did great. Do you remember I think it was in Serbia, the first time we performed Take the A Train and somebody screamed when we got to the melody?
I
And
do remember that.
it's
Yeah.
like the first time in my own head I was like, yes, it works.
It worked. I do remember that very clearly. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's so fun to be a part of this band, and like as much as we've been talking about sort of like carving out individual voice and carving your own path and things like that, it's like the and this isn't in opposition to that at all, but like having a bunch of people coming together who have their own voices and like finding like common musicality and like being able to play together and like discover things together, that's something that you I think are like a master at facilitating. And when I got the call to do this, like it's something that I feel really grateful for, because it's not like I get called to play on jazz records. It's not like, so for someone to kind of reach across all these sort of ostensibly like just like man-made ideas of divides in genre and things like that, like to collaborate with me and Rafiq, and it's something I'm always grateful for, and I think has been really magical, and like I'm really proud of the record we made together, and the touring we've done together has been really fun, and um, the exchange of different musical languages I think is something that I always learn, like in some ways like the most from. So yeah.
Let me just play a minute of this. some trumpet player comes in. It's funny hearing this again from the studio. Ian and Rafik and I have been working on this recording from Poland last, when was it? In November 2023.
Mm-hmm.
We've now put it together and we're going to put it out as a special subscriber release. So it's Gifts Trio live in Katowice. That'll be coming to you, I guess, around the end of the year. But we played it quite a bit faster live. And then I was also reminded that we toured this music in a quintet with Tomika Reed on cello, and that solo section that we just heard, she kicked in her octaver
Yeah.
in Ljubljana for the first time, I think. And it was like
Yeah, it was Ljubljana.
the low end that Rafik is playing with, and suddenly it was like, okay, I can go lower than that. And not only that, it was like so fat sounding.
Yeah, that was so fun.
So
Yeah.
really fun and really great that you can make time to do it. And I think we're playing next Saturday at North Sea Jazz Festival, aren't we? And then we have some dates in Spain, and
Mm-hmm.
so really looking forward to it.
Likewise, yeah.
Good luck on your long flight from Mexico City all the way to Amsterdam.
Oh, it's not so bad.
Great. That was fantastic music. What was the name of the Sunlux record, in case anybody wanted to go find that?
Oh man, it's part of we did a thing during the pandemic where we put out basically 3 records, all named like Tomorrow's Volume 1, 2, and 3, and I can't remember which volume that one is on because we kind of made all of it at once. But it's Tomorrow's. Yeah, if you look up Tomorrow's, it's in there. Yeah,
Tomorrow's, and there's
3
3
volumes.
albums
Yeah,
worth
yeah,
material.
yeah. We did that and Everything Everywhere score kind of at the same time, so it was a good way to keep busy during the pandemic.
Are you guys working on a new score? Is it confirmed that
Yeah.
you're making another movie?
We're working on a new score. I'm also working on a score on my own, which is my first time doing that for like a feature, like an indie film, and I'm excited about that. Sunlux is also working on new music, just Sunlux music. So the train keeps on going. Yeah.
Anything we should know about the new film that Sunlux is scoring? I mean, maybe you're not allowed to.
I don't think I'm allowed to share exactly what it is, but it'll be coming out next summer.
Wow, blockbuster.
I'm always bad at keeping up with like the NDA language, but I just try to err on the safe side.
But it's going to be a movie that we'll hear about when it comes out. Let's put it that
Probably, yes. Yeah.
way.
Dave knows a little bit about what it is.
I do. I'm right, but I don't want to be the one that said what I wasn't supposed to be said.
Yeah.
So we'll find out soon enough. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thanks for making the time, Ian.
Of course.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks so much for listening to the Greenleaf Music Podcast, A Noise from the Deep. We will be back next month with another episode, and we really appreciate your ears. Go on over to greenleafmusic.com to check out everything that's happening. Thank you.